with another engaging episode of Relational Leadership, where we provide you with invaluable insights and lessons to help you become the kind of leader that people truly want to follow. Join us every week as we unravel the secrets of effective leadership and empower you with the skills necessary to make a lasting impact on your team and organization. Hi, I am Stephanie Clements.
And I am Shawn Dawley, and today we're going to be talking about what happens to you both personally, functionally, and I think importantly, emotionally when suddenly you're let go.
Yeah.
I think gone are the days where you went to the factory and clocked in for 40 years and retired with that proverbial gold watch. A lot of us now will probably jump to multiple jobs throughout our careers, sometimes of our own volition. Sometimes it's when we have somebody call us in and say, "Okay, I've got some tough news to share with you."
All right. They're
And
holding that pink
that's
slip.
right. That's right. So I'm going to let Stephanie kick us off here, and we're going to engage in that discussion. And hopefully, we have something today that resonates with you, and maybe even can help you when that not if but when scenario unfolds for you.
Absolutely. I think a lot of this happens in corporate America now. Um, you know, as things become more efficient and we have more, and could possibly increase with the presence of AI.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you may find yourself in this through no fault of your own, or, maybe you've got problems within the
Sure.
organization that
Yeah, that's right.
um, small businesses can sometimes close. You find yourself without, but there are a lot of reasons that you may find yourself without a job and have to start looking. Even though unemployment is at its lowest, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who are underemployed
Hmm.
or
That's right.
are in a spot to be looking again.
Hmm.
Uh, I personally have experienced this very recently. And so I can give testimony as to the effects and some of what to do when you're going through it.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Once upon a time, when people were going to that factory that I fictitiously built earlier in the conversation, they suddenly look over on Monday and there's some people there that they didn't recognize putting together a machine that didn't look familiar. And then they eventually find out it's some sort of automated robot. And suddenly their hands on assembly line job is being automated through robotics.
Right.
And we've now lived through that for decades, right? Well, now I think that the most logical parallel is going to be, like you mentioned, artificial intelligence will be coming for some of the so-called knowledge jobs.
Right.
Robotics were able to displace people who got paid for what they did. AI will begin to displace people who get paid for what they know. And that is going to be, I think, a major disruptive shock to the so-called white collar workforce that is it is inevitable.
Yeah.
It is inevitable.
So again, whether it's through, powers that were beyond your control or whether it's something that you did specifically, um, it can happen to anyone. So my first point of advice is no matter what your position, be working like you're interviewing for the next job.
Yeah.
You know, being visible, going above and beyond will help you when it comes time to be looking for the next job.
Yeah.
If that comes about. And if not, you can just be a great employee for the people you're with.
Yeah. Now
So,
that's great advice because when we take on a new role, we are probably feeling a tad overwhelmed, drinking from the fire hose, as they say, to learn that job, develop the skills to do that job. But even once we perfect our ability to do that job, somewhere on the other side of the planet is a smart person or a team of smart people working 80-hour work weeks trying to figure out how to make your job unnecessary.
yeah.
And so one of the toughest things to do as professionals is when we get comfortable, like, oh, wow, I've got this job on lockdown. I can
Yeah.
do this job in my sleep. Okay, well, then what are you doing with that excess intellectual
Right.
capacity to develop new skills or greatly improve the skills you have, because at some point in your working lifetime, that job is probably going away.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So having people notice that you do the things you do will help you definitely in the job search. It will help you with recommendations. So if your boss knows that you've gone above and beyond and you are having to be let go, whether, like I said, maybe it's financial economy reasons or
Yep.
whatever, because you've been working so hard, they would be able to and be glad to give you a recommendation and may even already know some people
Hmm.
that they could refer you to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, again, whether you end up staying in that job or you have to look, when you go above and beyond in your own job and become a leader there, and that doesn't matter what your position is. You can be a leader on the floor of a factory to being in a C-level position. So,
Yeah. And, you know, unless you're working for a psychopath, that Hollywood rendition of the corporate boss who sits around almost salivating over the idea of laying people off and firing people. In my experience, that's not how most people actually
no,
approach it.
no,
Most people don't really enjoy letting people go. So if on balance you're a good person working for a good person, if the realities are such that your position is no longer justified, whether it's for those macro level,
right,
economic, considerations, or maybe it's a little more targeted. If you have done your part to establish a good interpersonal relationship with the people you work with and the person for whom you work, well, that's going to probably be the biggest asset as you venture out to find that next chapter.
right,
If you're great at what you do, but you've just got a horrible personality and disposition, that's the instance they probably are like, oh, give me a reason. Give me a
yeah,
reason to finally let you go. And then they're not going to be much of an advocate helping you
right.
get started in that next chapter.
So next, what I would tell you to do, first off, no matter what, give yourself time to feel and absorb what you have to. Take a day, take 2 days, take a week, and it can be a blow to your ego,
Sure.
self confidence, things like that. Take some time to just kind of absorb what happened and where you are, but then also, if it was with cause, take time to reflect and figure out what you did,
Yeah.
what you could do better. You may even reach out to coworkers and say, what are some things that you think I could have done
Hmm.
differently that would help me in my next venture? It not that you're trying to get your job back, but that you don't want it to cause problems in the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the things that I impart to people is that usually problems are not 100-0. It's not typically 100% the other party's problem and
Right.
0% case. So, but in many cases, it's not exactly 50-50. And so I appreciate what you're saying, Stephanie, is that even in the heat of the immediacy of being let go, if you can objectively assess, all right, this was probably 75% things outside my control, take full ownership of the 25%,
Right.
because that's where the growth is going to come. And I'll quickly say that's easier said than done, especially as you mentioned, trying to absorb the emotions of all of that. But what I would tell people is that, similar to being in the gym, if you put weights on there and you can do 10 reps of it really easily, there's no growth there. The growth
Right.
is only happening when you're really struggling. So as painful as it is in the moment, as you struggle through and try to figure out, okay, well, even if it was a minority fraction, what portion of this was something that I can really think about, reflect upon, work on to make myself better going forward?
That's right. So the other intimidating part can be, have you updated your resume? And, with AI and whatever, loading your resume into one of the many job site portals, they look for certain keywords.
Mhm.
And so, that can be really intimidating. So even if you have a great resume, it may or may not have the right keywords and things like that.
Yeah.
So this is
Yeah.
where you may want to actually consult a professional resume writer because they get to know what keywords are needed. So, your soft skills as well as your hard skills
Mhm.
need to be in there. And it can be difficult. Maybe you have morphed. I mean, for myself, I had morphed into something and into a position that had nothing to do with my degree.
Mm. Okay.
And so, I had a degree in dental hygiene, but I haven't done dental hygiene in 20 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that degree doesn't play to a marketing, to a sales role, to
Mhm.
so it was like, okay, so I need to make sure that I have keywords in
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
that really expose what I do and my abilities. So if you have that, a lot of times it can be a lot easier to sit down with a professional resume writer and have them get that ready.
Yes, and one way to look at it is I can go to Home Depot and I can acquire and accumulate 2 truckloads of material. It doesn't mean that I'm the best one to assemble it and turn it into a gazebo. You've done the hard work. The life you've led to this moment, you've attained those
Yeah.
credentials, those experiences. Don't neglect the value of having a professional help you assemble all of that in a way that's going
Yeah.
to resonate with the person reading it, because it's easy for us to fall in love with the things we've done, the titles we've held, the credentials we've accumulated. But having hired a whole bunch of people, I'll pick up a resume. You've got about 10 seconds.
Right. To
And
grab attention.
I have seen people that really were superstars, that they were A plus caliber employees that were running around town with a C minus level resume.
Yeah.
It was 4 pages long. It listed all of their tasks they had done. It didn't really convert that into the abilities for which I was hiring.
Right.
So, Stephanie, I could not agree with you more. As cheap as I am, that's one of the few times I will get off my wallet, is to have, okay, this is what you do for a living. Help me convert this into something that is going to make sense and resonate with the person that it needs to resonate with, which is
Right.
the person considering you for that job.
So the next thing, and again, these are all things that I have done for myself also. Stay visible. So whether you continue, posting things on LinkedIn that are valid to your career, going to networking functions, getting out around the people that you want to consider hiring you, or that may know people that
Mhm.
have positions open. Do not sit at home and wait for it to just come to you.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, you may be the Rolling Stones, but as far as the world is concerned, you're just another crappy garage band, and you're gonna have to play as many dive bars as you possibly can get in
Right,
front of, because you never know. It might be that next thing you do, that next post you make, that next networking event you attend, that could be what opens the door. Instead, it opens the door that's even bigger and better
right.
than what you had just left.
So I already do a lot of networking, but I think it's so important. And I have people come that say, "Oh, I would come, but I'm not working now, so I'm not after." And I'm like, "You're absolutely the person who
Yeah.
should be there," because many times, and I've experienced this myself helping other people who show up and they say, "Well, I'm actually looking for a job." And I ask what they do. And they said, and somebody right before, just 10 minutes before that, had said, "I'm looking to hire somebody." And I'm like, "Let me bring you over here and introduce you." So it
Mhm.
can really make a difference just being there. And again, they would make that introduction
Yeah.
had they not come out when they were looking. So it's important to stay visible as much as possible and getting out into industry type of meetings. If, if you work for Ford and, you've been going to any of the auto association meetings, going to places that other people would know
Mhm.
of those, maybe it's the body shop,
Mhm.
association or things
Yeah.
like that. But getting out around people, because you don't know who you'll run into there, where your resume may or may not make it to their desk.
And you never know who you might bump into who says, I have often thought about approaching you
Yeah,
for work, but I just assumed that you were forever locked down with company XYZ
right.
Incorporated. You're telling me that you are now on the job market and available? I mean, so again, I'm not trying to minimize the actual micro trauma that may be associated with your boss calling you in and saying, "Okay, it's not you, it's me." But
Yeah, right.
however, again, in a country of 340 million people with 160 million jobs, of which 12 million are currently vacant and are looking for people, the statistical probability that you are currently in the single best fit for you, it's low enough to know that there may be some other options out there.
Sure.
And so even if it catches you off guard and it wasn't the way you would have scripted it out, if suddenly you are open, I think there are some things to be optimistic about. But again, I don't want to jump over what you mentioned earlier. And I'd like to hear more about you about the shock, to the
Yeah.
system, because we've all experienced it to some degree.
Well, I know for me, it was a shock, and I have been very visible, with my company. And so, with the former company. And so that was something that I honestly never expected to be in this position. But having stayed visible, I was also lucky enough, because I was so visible with the other company, to have some people go, "What? You're available?"
Hmm.
And have some opportunities come, some within my industry, some that weren't in my industry, but that people were like, "We want somebody like you." I had some even say, "We'll make the role if you'll
Sure.
come." So,
Yeah.
that was a really nice thing. But, you know, I feel like I have had to go through the stages of grief
Right. Yeah.
because,
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I'm not. I
I
don't mean to laugh, but I mean that's 100% exactly what it is. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was extremely hurt in the first part.
Yeah.
I was then very angry.
Sure.
So, go back to me. I can say that after years of therapy, I was very angry.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
um, so, I've had, and then it was, going through some acceptance and
Yeah.
then, moving forward. But absolutely, because it was a job that I loved. And, you feel like you lose friends and people that you love. And uh, it's a blow to your self-esteem and your self-confidence.
Well, and so when you talk about the stages of grief, if we Google that, there's probably different lists, but I think a common one is that like initial like shock,
Mhm.
followed by anger, followed by denial, followed by despair, and then eventually acceptance. And I'm not going to mention his name, but in a previous life, when I was in a leadership position on a deployment overseas, one of my pilots came back in after he thought he was done for the day. He's putting away all of his gear, hanging up his night vision goggles, doing his intel debrief. And another sortie comes down from higher headquarters. And I look at the board and like, he's really the only one that I can fit in to do this one specific sortie right now. So I go back and I say, again, I'm not going to mention name. You guys got to do it. You got to turn around, undo
Go
everything
back
you just
up.
did, go back out there. What? What? That's ridiculous. There's no way. There's no way that's happening right now. It just seems like no matter what we do, it's just never enough. But you know what? If that's our job, we'll go do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, one, two. You just went through all 5 stages of grief, like in
You're
one
like
breath. Like how? So some people will quickly cycle
right.
through, and other people may take longer. And so what I would encourage you is to give yourself permission. If one day later from getting the news, you say, okay, by Friday, I will be completely emotionally healed from this. And then when you're not, you can really start to put extra pressure on yourself.
Right.
Some people quickly recover. Some people, and again, it depends on the circumstances,
Sure.
may take more time. You take that time, but don't take an infinite amount of time.
Right. I'm one that I've always kind of given myself to, when something happens and it rattles me, if I need to take a day, you know, and this can be, you can be fully employed and need a day, sometimes a sick day is a mental
Oh yeah,
health
sure,
day,
sure.
cry, do whatever. But after that day, it's time to get up,
Yeah.
pull up your
Yeah.
pants, get out there and take care of things. It doesn't mean you don't still feel things, but you don't just sit and wallow in it.
Yeah. And I can think of some times where I was in situations like that, and I thought, well, I'm going to wait until I am psychologically ready to take the steps. And what I learned is that while difficult, sometimes you got to take some steps to help you get psychologically ready. Sometimes you say,
Right.
okay, look, I do not feel like doing this, but I am going to do steps 1, 2, and 3. And then you begin to build a little bit of momentum and inertia. And then your psyche is getting kind of pulled along in the right
Right.
direction because you're like you said, all right, we just have to go do this.
Well, and that's it, just like I said, it does. It's hard on your self-confidence when you lose a position that you felt like you had locked down.
Yeah.
Um, so the longer you sit, the more of that self-confidence kind of
Oh
goes
yeah.
down.
Yeah.
So you don't want to take time to just again, the longer you sit, take time to feel it, but the longer you sit, the less self-confidence you have.
Yeah, I mean, it might sound simplistic, but it's like, marinating a steak. Like the longer you just sit there marinating in your pity,
Yeah.
the more and more of it you just absorb, and it doesn't really rectify itself.
Right. No.
Now, sometimes, you are the one person, like, hey, for any number of reasons, you are getting let go. Um, I was doing some consulting for a major telecom company, and I'll leave it at that. And I was in there Tuesday through Friday, uh, to do what I was going to do. Well, Friday at 2 o'clock, every phone in every cubicle rang once, and then I guess went to voicemail. And you heard everybody's Microsoft Outlook at the same time go bing, 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 bing. This company had sent out at the exact time to a bunch of people, thank you for your service. You are no longer required to work here. That was the way that, and again, like the old Office Space movie. Well, we found it better to always fire people on Friday. There's less drama, right?
Yeah.
So that was a case where, I mean, really out of the blue, like a bunch of people
Right.
all got their proverbial pink slip, and they were handed, severance and things like that,
Sure.
but that was like a collective shock.
Yeah.
And so they didn't, I mean, they could commiserate with other people, but suddenly a whole bunch of the same people doing the same stuff in the same market are suddenly looking for the same jobs. And that
Right.
can really create
Yeah. And the
some
more
extra
prepared
hurdles.
you are,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
that's doing that. So that brings me to the next point of, if you're getting severance, that can be great, but you do want to look over your severance agreement. And it's not a bad idea to have an attorney review it.
Hmm.
Um, Especially if you're in a really specific type of industry where there may be non-competes,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
non-solicitations, you want to make sure that you are actually free to go
Hmm.
to the companies, that you may want to, or whether you've got to kind of change or switch what you're doing or negotiate in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
severance.
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes when people receive that, we talked about the immediate shock, and you're going to need some time to absorb that. But some people think, okay, well, they gave me, I'm going to make it up, 10 weeks of severance. Oh,
right.
good. I've got 2.5 months off. Well, I wouldn't wait
No,
2.5 months
don't wait
and
two
then
and a half months
start
to go
looking.
start.
Instead, um, give yourself that time. That a severance is a great
Sure.
way to give yourself a little bit of time on the front end to just decompress, catch your breath. But I would treat that severance pay almost like you paying yourself to go get that next
Right.
job.
Right.
Go get that next job that's going to give you severance 3 years from now.
Right. So, no, hopefully you get something sooner and then, you make a little bit of double pay,
Right.
but which would
Yeah, that
be
happens
nice
too.
to then, but it most times jobs take a little bit longer to get. So that severance is what is giving you time to land on your feet. But you also do want to go ahead you know, you may need to go down and file for unemployment, things like that, get that ball rolling also. Hopefully you don't end up needing it.
Mhm.
Um, but you want to have that rolling because sometimes unemployment for it to start takes a little while before it actually hits
Yeah.
accounts and things like that. So, especially if your skill is very specific, you know, and
Mhm.
you have to find somebody
Sure.
who has an opening for that particular skill.
And yeah, and that's a great point because let's say that you are an underwater welder. Okay, that is an exceptionally explicit skill
Right.
that pays well, but you're so that's probably the thing that you can most monetize in the workplace because not a lot of people can go down into the murky waters of the Ohio River and weld
Right.
on a train track trestle, right? Um, but in other cases, I would challenge you if you have been in the workforce for a while, you probably started out getting paid for what you did, whatever the tasks of your job were.
Mhm.
But if you've been working for a while, you have probably grown in the roles. Even if the title of your last 3 or 4 jobs looked similar, you've probably built some essential so-called soft skills such that you might have a much wider marketable value than
Right.
maybe you even realize. And so, like you talked about, having an attorney look over a severance package, having a professional resume writer look over your curriculum vitae or what have you. Um, Finding some trusted advocates that can help you maybe step back and objectively assess, okay, what abilities and skills do I actually have
Right.
that might be valued in different industries, different sectors, different companies, because you're probably more valuable across a wider spectrum than the specific resume experiences that you've accumulated.
Yeah. I see people every now and then, and you can assess the reasons, but people put on social media, describe me in, 3 words or whatever. That is something that it can actually be really helpful, if people will be honest
Hmm.
in it. But as you start, especially if you're looking
Hmm.
for a job, so if you're there, and people that know you and say, describe me, say something, that when you think of me, this is what you think of. You may find some things that you had no idea that other people see
Yeah.
in you,
Right.
you know?
Right. Right.
And when somebody said you're like, "Wait, what? Really? That
Right.
I didn't know I did that." But, people different people see you in different lights,
Mhm.
and you have to be prepared to take the negative and the
That's right.
positive
Yeah.
with that. But, if everybody says, "Oh, hard worker, this," and then somebody says, "You're a lazy bum," you may have a personality conflict with that person.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that is, or maybe they saw you on the one day you decided to take off, and
Yeah.
that's so
Right.
for whatever reason that's in their memory.
Yeah.
There can be those one-off things that don't fit with your
Yeah.
normal thing.
Well, sure. Yeah. None of us want to be judged by our worst day. And unfortunately, in a smartphone camera,
Yeah.
social media world, that's becoming more and more of a thing, right? Like, oh, well, you've been Mother Teresa for the last 20 years, but I found this 10-second clip of you in college. So we're going to
Right.
cancel you. You're done.
Well, it's kinda like, I mean, you can see the pictures that get posted, and, all day you've been smiling and whatever, and somebody got you and you're like,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
There's a,
that's the one that's in everybody's memory now, so
yeah. And then, like you mentioned about these, attributes, keep in mind that things that are important can come off like boilerplate. Like if you try to tell people, well, I've got integrity and I've got a strong work ethic. Well, very few people would tell you that they lack integrity
Right.
or I'm very lazy. So when you're having those conversations with people that know you pretty well and you're asking them to help you see from the outside looking in, what are some attributes I have that are somewhat uncommon? it may sound somewhat generic, but it's getting a little more specific when they tell you, for example, you are really good at taking the initiative in situations that are exceedingly ambiguous. When everybody else is paralyzed because of like the lack of clarity, you're really good at getting things started. Something like that may not mean much to some people, but
Mhm.
there's somebody out there that owns a company that goes, "Holy crap,
Yeah.
I need 10 people like that,"
Right, right.
because the complexity and dynamic of our industry, it causes a lot of the analytical people on our team to like kind of shut down.
Yeah.
I need somebody that with limited guidance can just get things going.
Yep.
So, really have people help you figure out what are those intangibles that are kind of hard to capture on a resume bullet, but
Sure.
actually do have value, because that might be the gateway to that next job that pays you twice as much.
That's right. So, I personally can, very happily, announce, even though I'm not saying the company names, that while I would have never left my former company, being as visible as I was and then staying as visible, I am taking on a role that is much larger than where I came from, as well as, there will be a lot more income, a lot more responsibility. Um, but, those things definitely worked for me. So if you're in that position, especially LinkedIn, but Facebook also,
Mhm.
again, just posting things, showing you still out there, posting knowledge about your work and things like that are going to help you stay visible to the hiring managers.
Yeah.
And so, if you do anything else, I would say that's one of the most important.
Yeah.
And networking, again, you're going to want to go through the basic things, filing your unemployment, feeling it, but the two biggest things I can say is networking and being visible
Yeah.
on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, uh, on the front end, you've probably maybe not been let go recently from a job that you got caught off guard. Maybe you got passed over for the job. You
Yeah.
thought, and what I would tell people is, um, each of us has our own experiences, but by not throwing yourself too long of a pity party, and
Mhm.
just like you're saying, all right, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Let me keep moving forward. If nothing else, on faith, and then eventually my emotions and everything else will catch up. Earlier in my career, I was passed over for an entry level position by an organization that 15 years later I was asked to lead.
Yeah,
So you never know.
that's
You
right.
just never know. And what I chose not to do was at least openly voice my disgust.
Yeah.
I wasn't happy with it, but I kept that to myself. I didn't run around town, bad mouthing the organization that, again, years later would ask me to lead the entire
Sure.
operation.
Well, and
Because the last thing you're gonna do is
that's
burn a bridge, right?
absolutely, that is really important because, there's a lot of competition in my industry. I could and I've seen some people who are like, nope, your competition want nothing to do with you,
Yeah.
um, doing that in a day and age where, you know, your job situation is always fluid. You do not ever know who you're going to end up working for, um, that it is in the industry,
Yes.
or who you may are working with, or
Yeah.
that you need to hire.
Yeah.
Um, all of those things. So it's important to, you know, you don't have to buddy up with your competition, but it's important to stay professional.
Yeah.
And you want them seeing you as somebody to be, again, let's be the leaders that people want to follow.
Right.
Um, so be that person either that they want to be or wish they had someone like you so that when that time comes, that you do need something, they're ready and waiting in the wings and ready to grab you up.
Well said. All right.
So,
Well, Stephanie, great thoughts.
yeah, well, thank you guys for being with us today. Hope that this gave you some good information. If so, we would love for you to share it and also follow us on Spotify, Audible, and Apple Podcasts. We're also on YouTube. We'd appreciate any followings and would love to hear your thoughts. Also, if you have ideas that you would like, feel free to send us those. And we appreciate you being here again. Have a great rest of your day.
See you next Tuesday.